Submission is what we're talking about today, and that's an awesome topic, right? We love submission. Guys, really, we don't. We like to talk about submission only if we're putting somebody in a chokehold and waiting for them to tap out, right? And if you're a lady, it's even worse. I mean, you have to hear about submission all the time, and if you have to hear one more guy make a joke about getting to the kitchen woman and submit, then you just might slap a fella. And I don't blame you. I would want to as well. But when we look at submission, it has a lot to do with how we treat authority. How we treat authorities that God has put in our life. And I think we would all agree that we are to be subjected to or to submit to divine authority in our life. But the earthly authorities are where we have trouble. But I would say that it's a biblical principle that how we treat earthly authorities is directly related to how we view our divine authority. See, it doesn't matter the size of your church or what your position is. You could be an intern, student pastor, or even a lead pastor. Submission is a discipline that you have to practice. And it doesn't matter what size your church is, everybody has an authority in their life. Whether that authority is a pastor, or it's your church body, or it's a deacon, or it's a director, you have somebody in ministry that you're supposed to submit to. And as young leaders, it's very hard to submit. It is. It's hard to submit because we operate under the delusion a lot of things that our way is the best way. And submission, though, is not necessarily, when I talk about our senior leaders, it's not an indictment on them. I've served with great senior leaders. I still serve with great senior leaders. And it's a submission, the fact that we have a trouble submitting is not an indictment on them. But submission could rather be a mirror by which we can measure our pride. See, when we practice submission, we're polishing a mirror that we're looking into to where we can measure the pride that we have in our own hearts. See, as an associate student pastor, I can remember playing the game, and you've played this game too. If I were in charge, I would, and you fill in the blank. When I'm in charge, I will, and you fill in the blank. And this isn't always a bad game to play as a young leader because you can learn how you want to lead. But the trap that we fall into is believing the lie that if I were in charge, everything would be better, right? And we fall into that trap of believing if I were in charge, I would be better. And that sets us up to have an attitude where we try to subvert our authorities. And so as we look at our authorities and look at the authorities we are to submit to, we have to understand that the more authority we gain in our life, actually we are then submitted to more authority. See, the more authority we are given, the more authority that we actually have over us. And we learn this oftentimes the hard way, is when we get into the position that we always long to be in, then we realize the decisions we always long to make were not always the easiest decisions to make. Jesus himself was not even exempt from submission. He wasn't exempt from submitting to authority, not earthly authorities or divine authorities. And we can see this in the way that he interacts with his disciples and the way he interacts with Pharisees. In fact, in John chapter 6, he says, I didn't come down all the way from heaven so that I could do my will. I came so that I could do the will of the Father. And so the authorities in our life, the authorities even in Jesus' life, were there to direct us to God's will for our life. See, when we think that we get a pass on submission as a student minister or whatever, as a young leader, as an intern, whatever we are, whatever our position is, then we give ourselves a pass that not even the Son of God got. And then we all know the passage in John chapter 13 where Jesus, he's in the garden and he's weeping and he says, if any way possible, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. But not my will, but yours be done. And when he says, not my will, but yours be done, something very interesting happens. It says, an angel of the Lord came and strengthened him. So the bottom line of submission is that submission comes from a power that we do not naturally have on our own. So whether you're trying to implement new ministries and you're bumping against authorities, or whether you're interacting with your spouse, or whatever you're doing, submission always comes from a power that does not come from within. It comes from the Spirit of God inside of us. See, acknowledging that there will be a higher will can actually put you in the center of God's will. And those earthly authorities in our life, they were put there for a reason. My dad and I had a great relationship growing up, but I do remember a few fights that we had, and they were very silly. We had some fights where I would get mad at him because he was actually encouraging me that my bad round of batting practice wasn't quite that bad. Or I got mad at him because he wouldn't buy me that F350 diesel that I really, really needed. Well, we all know that a kid from the suburbs doesn't really need an F350 diesel. And when I look back on our relationship, I don't think, man, I really wish he'd bought me that truck. I think, man, I really wish I would have been a little bit more respectful of his authority because he knew better. I think if we look at the authorities that we have in our life and we evaluate where we are, then we will be glad when we look back on our ministry and say, I submitted to the authority that God put in my life.